All right, welcome to the AI Powered Business Talk by Scalefree. I'm your host, Michael Olschimke. I'm CEO of Scalefree, or one of the CEOs of Scalefree. I'm responsible for the training consulting business. And this is essentially my live stream where I discuss what happened this week, or what concerned me this week, essentially, what kind of topics I dealt with, essentially. And with me, I have two guests. At least one is already in the channel here, and that's Richard and Martin, and we will discuss they brought in some interesting feedback essentially for, I would say, the work I'm doing. So yeah, let me just talk about this, and for those who joined this not for the very first time, you know the format more or less. I have a mind map, and discuss everything data and AI. On the left side I have data topics. On the right side of this mind map I have essentially the AI topics. But it's also about business, right? So there's also some, it should not be just technical stuff here or technical topics. We discuss essentially how to apply this in a business. Let me just double check here. Richard is coming in. Okay, cool. So give me 1 second. I assigned guest 2. Perfect. Okay, hey Richard. So yeah, both guests are here. Perfect. So, but let's discuss my mind first. So last time I talked about, at least briefly, how I essentially turned from opposing data vault to evangelizing it, right? I became a trainer later on. I trained more than 3,000 people. So something must have happened essentially. And I want to dig a bit deeper into that because it's a good starting point for our discussion today. And today is really about disruptive concepts, disruptive technologies, and how to deal with this essentially. So I remember my first project where I was exposed to Data Vault. That was before my Data Vault career started essentially, right? I was a junior consultant, and we just lined up a project with an automotive, and the client, I mean, the idea was to use Data Vault essentially with this client. So somebody explained to me what Data Vault is, and they explained this to me as a enterprise model to model your enterprise, your business essentially. The only problem is they explained to me that you have essentially customers, you have products, you have essentially customers purchase products, and we model this as hubs, links, satellites. A hub for customer, a hub for products, a link in between for the purchase pattern, and then you have descriptive data to describe essentially what they've done essentially. That's all cool. The problem is I was like, okay, why don't we use an immense style data warehouse or enterprise model for that? Because a lot of people know that, right? And Data Vault wasn't much known back then. It was in 2011, I believe. So I said, why can't we use an immense style 3NF model for modeling the enterprise? And if I want to analyze the business, why don't we just use a star schema, Kimball style star schema to query aggregates and so on, right? So I didn't get the value. What I saw some value, but I saw the value more on the side for the consulting firm. So think about this. You as a client, you are a consulting firm, and they come in with Data Vault. They do something, and nobody, back then in 2011, there were not many consultants who knew what Data Vault is. So they're starting this Data Vault thing and modeling something, and you have no idea what they're doing, and you never get rid of them, because if you want to replace these consultants, you can't, because they're using Data Vault and nobody else knows it, right? So it's a good lock-in mechanism for consulting firms to get into your firm, do something, and you never get rid of them again. So I saw some value, but not for the end client. I saw it for the consulting firms. And if there's no value for the end clients, I said, if there's no value for end clients, then it will be maybe a hype, but then it will not be a long-living concept essentially, right? And I was at the beginning of my career, so I was looking for some concepts that I could use during my career to build my career on essentially. And this was not it, because I thought, well, this is a hype essentially, but this will go away essentially once the clients realize there's no value in for them. And then my boss back then forced me into the training with Dan Inset, the inventor of Data Vault, and the idea was to go to Vermont and go for a training. I didn't like the topic. I didn't want to learn it actually, and I actually also called up some of my mentors, and one of my mentors said they know Data Vault, they tried it out, and it didn't work for them. Well, he said it didn't work. He didn't say it didn't work for me or whatever. It's right. He said it didn't work, and so it was complete nonsense, something like that in this area, and so I was really saying, well, I'm not interested in Data Vault. I don't want to go for it. I just don't care. And I tried to convince my boss back then to not join the training, to stay behind, do some groundwork, basic work in the project, and when they come back, they can give me the gist of Data Vault, and we can go from there. And I mean, I'm just a junior here, so if you want to do Data Vault, I'm doing it, right? But I'm not. I don't want to go to the training. Had no chance because I was still in my probation period. I was in the first 3 months of the work essentially, so they could fire and hire me at any time, and I needed money, so I said, okay. My boss said, you come with us essentially, period. And so I had to go. And then during the training, well, I said, and people who know me know that I don't like to waste my time. And so I said, okay, how can I avoid wasting my time here? Because that sounded like a time waster. Flying there takes a day from Hanover, Germany over to Vermont. That's a day of flight. Then you have 3 days of training. The guys want to roam around somewhere in maybe Montreal or Boston or something. And then you fly back. So I'm looking at 6 days of wasting my time. And I said, okay, what can I do to avoid wasting my time at least? And then I realized that actually I don't know if Data Vault is nonsense or not, right? I said crap, I believe. So I didn't know. I did not, because I didn't know Data Vault. So I made a decision based on gut feeling and recommendations by my mentors, but I actually didn't know if Data was good or not. So I essentially said, okay, if I can't avoid going to this training, let's fly there, but use my time. And the idea was that I will essentially educate myself in Data Vault to make an informed decision, educated decision that Data Vault is nonsense, right? I didn't expect anything else. I just turned this uninformed decision into an informed decision. That's it. And then I have then I had at least a good feeling. Yeah, it's all nonsense. It's waste of time. So that's how I planned my trip essentially. So I said, okay, for the flight, that's a full day. I can't waste the time there. So let's read a book. And Dan had a book out there, Supercharged Data Warehouse, was Data 2.0. No, Supercharged Data Warehouse. And I was reading that twice. 100 pages. You get this done in 8, 9, 10 hours of flight. And then I said, so yeah, I was reading this book, and I liked some ideas in the book, like audibility and real-time capabilities and security stuff and so on. But I didn't like the fact that there were a lot of claims in the book, but he didn't explain how to build this essentially. And those ideas resonated with me because I got my master's degree from Santa Clara University, and I was in a business school. And they teach us, for example, the Enron case, where managers essentially increase the revenues between the companies while there was no revenue actually, and just to collect their bonuses, right? And so we learned this Enron case up and down, and they essentially teach us that you don't steal from your company for multiple reasons. One is you don't steal from your company because they catch you anyway, so why would you steal in the first place? And the second thing is that every email gets tracked. Everything is audible, so you can't get away with this nonsense. And all the ethical and moral issues as well that comes along with it. But I mean, seriously, you don't steal from a company because they catch you anyway, so that's stupid. And I had a friend who was also working on investigating this stuff. So he was essentially a specialist for going through emails, more or less. They were searching for indications for fraud and so on. And so I knew these systems are audible, and yeah, I was also, there's one thing I was also interested in I was always working with data and mathematical models, and so I was interested in using essentially Data Vault on MPP classes, for example, how to distribute data across nodes to run, let's say, calculations, but also like any distribution, any audibility, real time. I was interested in real time. So I had a couple of topics that resonated to me, but the problem was that Dan didn't explain how to do this. So I developed a strategy, and I recommend that in my trainings as well. I developed a strategy whenever Dan made a claim how to build, when he made a claim that it's possible to build a real-time system, for example, I had a very simple question: how? How do you do this? How do you build this? And I asked this question again and again, essentially in a training. And my idea was that sooner or later Dan will be cornered, raises his hand and says, I don't know. That didn't work out. I realized that Dan tried out everything, he researched everything, and he tried it out on a very high volume of data and in a context with very high requirements. And then I realized what Data Vault really is. It's not we don't use it, you can use it, but we typically don't use it as a logical design for modeling the business. We use it in a more data-driven approach, where we model the raw data as it's being used by the business, and that's a reference to the business keys. That's how we use it, and that resonated also with me with my prior work in research, where we essentially in Silicon Valley everything is big data, so data-driven big data, schema on read, and so on. So that resonated to my prior education, prior work essentially much more, the data-driven approach to Data Vault, and that's what I learned from then essentially. And then essentially I realized what Data Vault is. See, the thing is this: I was looking for my career, I was looking for a topic, and I was especially looking for a disruptive concept of disruptive technology. And that brings me to the next topic here, Data Vault as a disruptive concept. The thing is this, let me change this. I talk about disruptive technologies first. Maybe that's a bit better. So in school, I took a couple of business classes, and one of the class, or we didn't have a class on disruptive technologies. We had some technology related classes, I would say, and we discussed disruptive technologies a lot. And the idea is that you have all these vendors coming up with new features, right? A new tool, maybe some new features in a tool, and so on. And a lot of these changes are incremental. So there's a new feature for the existing dashboard and gives you a new button, that kind of stuff, right? And it's an incremental improvement, yes, but it's not changing the way you work essentially. But then once in a time, and at least the way I learned this was, it's very seldom. Once in a lifetime, you essentially you see a disruptive technology where everything changes. It changes the way we work. Give an example. Let's say, and this was one of the examples I learned, photography. Back when I was young, which also the time now passed by. When I was young, my first photo camera was an analog camera, right? And everybody was using that. And yeah, it was all fine. We had these shops where you could go to develop your images. You got them on print and so on. There were all these little shops everywhere who would develop the film for you essentially. And then came the first digital camera. I remember that because I got one, and but it was really bad. I was an IT guy already. I was young, but I knew about resolutions and that kind of stuff and color depth and so on. But the values were really bad. I mean, it was not even VGA's resolution or something. It was really bad resolution, and it couldn't beat, by no means, it could not beat an analog image. No way in quality. The quality was really limited. But then I also saw, already back then, but without realizing, that these resolutions will improve over time. And then, if that's the case, if the quality of these images improve, then it will be much more convenient, because now I have a digital image, because I was scanning, back then I was scanning my analog images all the time, so I don't have to do that anymore. I have my digital image, I can use it, I can print it by myself if I want, or I go to some store and get them printed and so on. I could order these printouts and so on, so I saw it more convenient. And I saw also that the resolution will improve over time. And that's what we see with these disruptive technologies. They start from a starting point, but then the question becomes, does this technology has the potential, maybe not the capabilities today, but it has the potential of getting better than the current technology that we have, right? And that was, in my opinion, at least clearly foreseeable for the digital photography. But the thing is this: with disruptive technologies, there's already a market existing, right? So you have all these little shops where they develop these images. You have the vendors who create these analog devices, and they have a running business, so they make lots of money with this, right? And if a new technology comes in, you're risking their business, and that's a problem, right? And from their standpoint, if they would, let's say, if they would switch to a new technology, which is still bad, right? It's not good as analog devices. They go for a new technology. They're risking their current revenue streams for something where they don't know if it actually picks up or not. Could be it's interesting technology. Maybe it will pass by and overtake the existing technologies, but at the point you don't know. There's just this chance, right? This opportunity. So a lot of companies, they hesitate to jump on the next train and go for it, essentially. And that's a problem because they don't want to risk their current revenue streams. Well, there's some options how you can deal with this. Either you risk it, you just go for it, and say, well, if you clearly realize this is the future, so why would you stick with all technologies, right? So you jump on it, early on, push it forward, help to make it succeed essentially. That's one option. That's the a bit risky option. Or you start something like a startup, right? Or you help startups to go for this. But the worst thing you can do is you can ignore it. That's really a problem, because then sooner or later what happens is this. Somebody without the revenue streams, like the younger generation maybe, the next guys, they look at this technology from a different standpoint. They look at this from a standpoint, a new technology with a potential. And they have no revenue streams, so they don't care, right? They're not risking their existing revenue streams, so they start the startups, right? They start playing around with technology, they go for it. And the problem is, if you don't do that, if you don't build the knowledge, if you don't build the products, if you don't build the services, they're doing it. And while they're doing it, while you sleep, they will take you over, and then they have the technology, and you're getting out of business, essentially. That's the risk. So it's important, in my opinion, to identify these disruptive technologies, because they're much more often than people taught me. Or maybe I didn't really listen back then. But you see them again and again. Yeah, that's the idea. So these disruptive technologies, you should be on the lookout for that, especially as a company, because they might be the reason why you either succeed in business or go out of business, essentially. That's the idea. So, and Data Vault was a disruptive concept. I realized that when I came out of the training, when I realized what Data Vault really is. But I also saw so I proposed essentially to Dan, let's write a book on Data Vault. The problem was when we went for the book publishers, we really experienced exactly the problem I just mentioned, or just described. The book publishers, I remember we went through 3 or 4 larger brands, and we got turned down a lot. Out of 4, only 1 took us, but only because Bill Immel was publishing with them, and so they knew him, and he recommended us to the publisher, Morgan Kaufmann. And we received a couple of comments from the existing publishers. The coolest, or the weirdest, I don't know, the weirdest comment was essentially, hey, we got these other authors, and he clearly wrote it. I still have this email. He wrote us that we're making revenue with these other books, and if we take your book, we're risking the revenue of our existing authors. Why would you do this? And I wrote him back one line, because if you don't take the book, we go somewhere else, and they will risk your revenues. That's what's going to happen. So that's the most stupid answer you can give, or that's the most stupid thinking you can have, right? So if there's something new that risks your business, well, maybe you should take a serious look at this, because otherwise somebody else will risk your business. That's the counter argument. That's what it is. So yeah, we went for a different publisher then and sold the book there, and it was a good sell essentially. So that was the first indicator that I have something, because if you have a backlash from the existing environment, then you know you have some disruptive technology. Then that's a good indicator, let's say. And the same was from consultants. We claimed, and it turned out to be true, that we can essentially build data platforms, data solutions much more efficiently. We can automate the job. We can set up metadata, automate the generation of the entities. And automation here means, well, for the consultants back then, it said, okay, if these guys automate the generation of the data warehouse, if we don't do this manually anymore, then we have less hours to charge the client. So we were risking their revenue streams again, right? Because we're changing the way we work. And that was also a big one, because a lot of consultants came back to us and said, well, we don't care what you're doing. Don't kill our business, right? That's not a good idea, because it was all manual work, or mostly manual work back then. And that's also a good indicator. So disruptive technologies, I call this here disruptive concepts, because data was not a technology in that sense. But disruptive technologies and concepts, they change the way we work, they change revenue streams. And then you get a lot of backlash. That's what it is. And that's what we received. But that actually confirmed to me that the Data Vault is actually some interesting stuff, and I go for it essentially more and more. So it essentially increased my will to go for it essentially. So that's cool. So, and that's really how it worked out with Data Vault. So for years I was working against this backlash, helping clients to understand how to use Data Vault, and we became more and more successful. That's what it is. Because we were the young. Especially I was the young guy here, right? I didn't have the revenue stream. I was the guy who was challenging the existing businesses. That's what it is. So That's cool. And then essentially when I learned how data vault works, then essentially people asked me essentially because they knew what I was doing beforehand. I was distributing neural networks on MVP clusters at Santa Clara during my research topics, research term, and they were asking me essentially, can you generate the raw data vault or the data vault using AI? And that's when I sooner or later, a bit later, started thinking about this. I started thinking about this a couple of years ago, 5-6 years ago, when I started researching. Well, first of all, I thought this out, to be honest, for a year, 2 years. If an AI could generate the raw data vault fully automatically, how would it look like essentially? That was my first initial question. And then once I had a general idea how to build the system, then I started essentially doing the research. So that's how Flow.BI was born years ago essentially, all under the radar essentially in the garage, not in the garage but in the basement here. We developed this for years and researched this for years, and that's the outcome essentially now for now. And now we're more in the incremental cycle. So we have the technology now, and now we're incrementally improving it step by step essentially. And we do auto marketing, and on social media networks like LinkedIn or YouTube, it's always good to have a catchy title. So apologies here, same for here today's session, right? How to automate your data consultants. That's one thing. We had a webinar up there, or we have that up there still. Downsize your data project using AI. So get rid of your team, essentially shrink it and go for it. Well, that's not how it works, to be honest. So you as a data consultant, you can be relaxed to some extent. It's not that we are removing the data consultants here or automate. Well, we automate your job to some extent. But the thing is this. You all know there's a exponential growth in data volume. That's what at least I learned in school back in 2005 or something. There was this exponential growth in data volume, right? So more and more data needs to be processed. And that's from a text standpoint, it's easy, just add nodes, right? If your data volume goes up, just add nodes, problem solved. But the other problem is, with this data volume, we also see an exponential growth, an increase of data shape. I mean, back then, we were getting away with a couple of entities essentially to be processed. But nowadays, even a small data vault, data warehouse, they have hundreds of source tables to be processed. And my personal assumption or expectation is that this data shape will grow as well. There's only a bit of research for that, and that confirms it. I mean, but on the other hand, if you Google for some topic, you will always find some web pages confirm your opinion. But that's one thing. But you find some research on the data shape as well, and on the growth of the data shape. And from my personal experience, I can easily confirm that. So I see more and more data structures to be analyzed, more semi-structures like JSON, XML documents, more unstructured data sets to be analyzed, more relations, more data sources, more, right? And nowadays we have hundreds of source tables in a smaller data platform, and thousands of source tables in a typical data platform, I would say. If they all end up in a raw data vault, that's another story. But at least on a typical data lake, we have 10,000 of source tables essentially in a data lake, easily essentially. If not more, on larger corporations, could be exceeding 100,000 of source tables from different source systems, AD, SAP installations, and so on, right? So, and even the operational systems have thousands of source tables itself. SAP easily 2 or 10,000 of source tables. Salesforce has at least in a small setting, I believe 1,500 source tables. So they're becoming more and more massive. That's what it is. So there is an increase of the data shape, and it's exponentially growing. Now the problem is this: the data is being generated by IT systems a lot, right? And even AI systems generate more and more data. Who should analyze this data and turn it into knowledge, turn it into information essentially, right? Where you might need a report on this data, right? So you could argue there's more and more data scientists coming up, and we can hire them and they will do the job. But my argument is, how many more data scientists we get every year? It's not that it's a exponential growth of more and more data scientists, because that would mean that everybody in the world essentially becomes a data scientist or data engineer. But there's also pilots and nurses and so on, right? And I don't want to be that, but yeah, there's a lot of people who want to do that essentially. So there's only a fraction of those people who come out of school, university maybe, or some other school, who know how to engineer data or to work with data. And some people want to retire one day, so it's not a exponential growth of data scientists. especially because the globe has not an exponential growth anymore. It will flatten out essentially in the next years. So, and it is foreseeable actually based on the birth rates and so on. The the number of humans on the globe will not rise exponentially anymore in the future, like in 2050 or something, which is coming over, and only a fraction of the newborn kids will become data scientists. So I see a linear increase at best of new data scientists essentially, but not an exponential growth of data scientists. But still, your data shape is going exponentially up. So there's a widening gap between the data we generate, or the AI generates, or anybody generates. Everybody with a mobile phone these days and so on, right? Everybody's generating data and data structures, and then only a few more have to deal with this data. And that's a problem. So in my true opinion, from my heart, I truly believe in order to cope with this increasing gap between the data structures that we have to analyze and who should do it, this gap we can only close using IT, and especially artificial intelligence. That's the only way we can deal with this gap essentially. And there's many ways. I had last week John here on the call, and his approach was to use AI agents to integrate and process data. It's one option. I believe that it has a market. That's for sure. But I also believe that what we're doing here with data Vault also has a market. And it's not that you can use any tool for any solution. That's not going to work. So I'm more interested in the integration, for example. But yeah, but AI, that's how we close the gap essentially. It's the only option we become big here. We as humans, as mankind, can close the gap essentially, because otherwise we will have a lot of more data and more data which we can't analyze anymore. But there's lots of value in the data, right? So we have to at least analyze more data essentially. So and which means that we need actually not less people. We don't need less data scientists and less data consultants. We need more. Even with the use of AI, the AI only makes you more efficient and more effective dealing with the gap. But we need more people who can use the AI, do everything that the AI can't do yet. But we need more data consultants, that's for sure. So I don't see any reason why we need less people essentially of us here. So sorry for these catchy headlines sometimes. That's what we need to do to get through the all these messages on social media essentially. There's a webinar, you can check it out. That's on Flow.BI. So when you search for Flow.BI and go for Flow.BI. Let me just show it to you guys. Give me 1 second. If you go for Flow.BI, there's a media library up here. Hit the media library, and that's where you find, when you only scroll a bit, here you see the scared data consultants. That's what I'm talking about, right? So that's the webinar essentially, where we discuss this essentially, but the outcome is the same. So I will essentially explain what I just did essentially. So that's the idea. And then Flow.BI in that sense is also a disruptive technology. Let's think about this. Is Flow.BI a disruptive technology or not? Because it's first of all, you can argue about the model. Is it good or not? And I truly believe, that you as a human, if you know Data Vault, if you know Data Vault, I truly believe you can build a better Data Vault model manually than Flow.BI can ever do. Maybe, let me rephrase this, than Flow.BI can do, not ever. But the thing is this, first of all, Flow.BI is not as bad as it sounds. So Flow.BI, when I look at the resulting models, and the first goal for Flow.BI is to produce a valid model, a valid raw data vault, a valid data-driven raw data model, which means that you can always refactor it to derive a better model from what Flow.BI generates. That's one option. The other thing is, if I look at the range of valid but questionable, I mean not good, but still valid, and valid and really good, like human-like models, I would say from in this range, we are in the upper half somewhere. But it's also my baby, so I'm very positive about it, right? But still, we're in the upper half, that's for sure. We're not in the lower half, that's for sure. That's what I can promise. So, and we're just at the beginning of the journey, right? So we're going to incrementally improve this now, and we just did that for some parts of the model. Well, we actually did it 3 times already. So there is some incremental change going on. So, but even if, let's say, Well, and one more comment. Yeah, you could do a better model, but then the thing is this: what about 5,000 source tables? You could do a better model, but it will take you a long time to get there. While Flow.BI will generate a decent model, actually a good model, maybe not the best model, but a good model overnight, no matter how many source tables you attach, right? So if you have 5,000 tables, attach them to Flow.BI, it will generate everything out in overnight in hours, because we spin up nodes to process or to derive the raw data vault from your data, essentially. So that's a big difference, essentially. So is it a disruptive technology? Let's think about this. First of all, I would look at the trajectory. So where's it heading? So can I foresee a potential in the market? Is there a need, essentially, for this technology, right? Is there a need, and does it change the way we work? And in my opinion, it's a clear yes. It will change the way we work, because why would I model a data vault manually, a raw data vault manually, if I can just click a couple buttons, optimize some or influence the system, and off it goes, essentially, right? And then, does it have the potential to become better than the current approach? And it's also, in my opinion, a clear yes, because it's not, in many projects we have data vault specialists who don't know data vault, or not, or they have a let's say a assumption of data vault which doesn't hold true. They might not be good at data vault modeling. They might not be, and good here means there's different approaches to data vault. The most successful approach, in my opinion, of my experience, is the data-driven approach. That's what we teach and preach at Scalefree. And you can use anything you want. I'm good with that. But I see a lot of failed projects when they go some other way, when they go more logical design and so on. So, longer story, don't want to go to this. I discussed it last time, essentially, last stream. So you see a lot of consultants, a lot of teammates who do hub-sync satellites, but they don't really know data vault. There might be a lack of skill, lack of experience, lack of will. Sometimes they just also don't want to use data vault, right? So in this scenario, Flow.BI is doing better models, to be honest. That's what it is. So we're already exceeding those scenarios where you have a lack of resources who know data vault, essentially. So the potential is there, and it's going to improve, right? So that's the other thing, so that's the idea. And what are your options? So what are the options here to deal with a disruptive technology in general? Flow.BI, data vault. I mean, you could ignore the whole problem. You could say, well, Flow.BI doesn't care, or data vault, I don't care for that. We do it the old way, and either manually modeling raw data vault or using some other approach to data warehousing. You could go for that. But then again, the young guys will come. They will look at, essentially, they don't have the revenue streams. They look at the new technologies that they might use to build the revenue stream, and then they might take over, essentially. And you didn't, because you ignored the whole topic, you could say, well, then you're screwed, because these guys, the young guns, they know the new technologies and you don't. You could oppose it and really go against it and fight it, essentially. But the problem is, if it's a disruptive technology, you will lose the battle, because it's becoming better, because there are many people who are using it and improving it. So the results will become better. The way they work is better, because they're cheaper potentially, and so on, right? So there's different reasons why they use it, and why it essentially it improves and becomes better and better. So you're fighting something you will lose. And the other thing is, you could also, or you jump on it, right? So you look at the technology and try to learn it, try to adopt it, essentially, and jump on the train, essentially. Those are the three options you have. And today with me is essentially I have two data consultants here who actually jumped on the train, and they're still young enough, I'm saying, to go for it, and they're hungry for new technologies. So let me just get my two partners in here, and let me just give you voice. Hopefully. Okay. You have to unmute yourself, I believe. 1 second. Boy. Okay. You should be in the stream. I'm not sure how you get unmuted. Interview guests. Yeah, say hi, hi, guys. No, I don't hear you yet. Does it work for you? Say
yeah, it seems that
Richard
I'm already unmuted.
Yeah, you're unmuted. I believe Martin is muted on his side. Or I muted the guest. 1 second.
Two.
Oh, no, you should. Hey.
Yes. Now
Okay, sorry for that.
it's
Hey,
working. Perfect.
Cool.
Hello.
So welcome to my live stream. We had a discussion a couple 2 weeks ago or something. That so first of all, let me introduce you guys. Martin and Richard, they are essentially data consultants, I would say. You work in Czech Republic on banking projects and data vault projects a lot. You work in the community. You do a lot of Snowflake work, as far as I understand, and you're active in the Snowflake community. And you also happen to be data vault trained. So you came, I believe, to our training at Scalefree for the data vault practitioner class, the data vault 2.0 practitioner class. And also you joined the Flow.BI training a while ago, like a couple of weeks ago. And also both of you passed certification, so congratulations on that one. And you had a discussion with some peers about essentially Flow.BI and how it might change the way we work here essentially. And do you want to elaborate a bit on that? What's the feedback you got from peer consultants essentially?
Yes, it was very interesting discussion, and I believe it's very similar when you talk in a data community about this disruptive technology. You will find 2 or 3 groups of consultants. The first groups, they are somehow skeptical, but they are not skeptical because of their nature. They are skeptical because until that moment or until now, their companies, their employers, or their persons who are doing the business, they were not able to get them on that project. Okay, so it is very similar, like with a generative AI. There is still, let's say, some kind of the disrespect to this new technology, but because the people, they did not have a chance to use meaningful AI on the project. So this is the first group. Then there is a second group, the data consultants who just do not care, and then there is a group of the data consultants who says we would like to get into the touch with the disruptive technology, but we do not have a time because we have to do the business with the current technology. And if we focus more on the future technology, we just cut some part of the current revenue stream.
Yep.
Or we are afraid to adopt the technology because we might realize that we spent the resources, we spent the capacities, but at the end we will not get the business. And then there is the last fourth group of the data consultants who are already onboarded, who are already in. So this is let's say discussion about the risks, about the benefits of taking the risks.
I think it's also reasonable, right? I mean, they're consultants. They should essentially consult their clients essentially. So they should also give them the input for technologies. And you don't want to go for some risky technologies and recommend it to a client. That's for sure. Unproven technologies, that kind of stuff. So I can see that. What's your experience? Are you using AI in your projects these days, or?
I personally use AI on my projects almost every day.
Yeah.
Not yet as a part of a data integration, but in many cases just for the translation from the Czech to English, sometimes just to write more polite emails when I need someone to cooperate with me and I do not want to write something ugly, but mostly for the research. Mostly for the research.
Yeah. What about you, Richard?
Yeah. At first, about the discussions with my colleagues, I must say that at first there should be problem in our big customers, which are mostly utilities, energy, or banking with the data, because Flow.BI needs access to the production data, and here is a fear that should be a problem accessing the data from outside, from Flow.BI. So this is the first one, and the second one is about the data vault, the methodology, the work around it. And one of my colleagues said that is it able to build a business vault or information marts? I said no, it's only for the raw data vault.
Yep.
Okay, I'm able to build the whole raw data vault, not manually, but using some automation tool in 1 or 2 weeks. And why I need expensive tool which needs a huge computational engine and access to the productional data. So currently the attitude is like skeptical now, but I think that it has future. Not in the short period, but in the farther future, it will be able to help. Maybe not for the biggest players in the market, but for the middle layer, for production factories, for production companies, and similar similar industry, I think.
Let me address this. So the thing is this, we came up with an MVP, with a minimum viable product, and that product required essentially that Flow.BI can access your system, your data source, essentially extract the data into our own data lake for profiling, essentially, for analysis. And so that's how we went to the market. And then we discussed this with clients, and we received the same concerns, which are valid concerns, because you don't want to give your data to an external company, especially a startup, and they look at your data and capture your data inside their systems, right? And you're protecting it, and you're doing all efforts to protect your data, and then you all in a sudden give it out. Well, first of all, I mean, so what I'm going for now is a niche, right? I was starting to look for the niche of those organizations where they would be willing to do that, because there's always some small set of people who go for that. And you could also imagine, I mean, you are storing your data in cloud providers like Snowflake and Databricks. You store your data actually in these systems, but I get it, it's not a startup anymore, right? So, but still, they started out as a startup as well, and somebody was willing to share their data with them. So I was looking for this niche. And then what you do is when you introduce a software package like this, you have to develop the niche, and that means that you have to increase the potential customers who are willing to go for this, or where Flow.BI is a potential solution. And by growing the niche means you have to add features, but you have to make it in a way that you don't waste your resources adding features that doesn't grow your niche. You always focus on the niche, essentially, to increase the niche. So what we've done is, in those discussions we had with these potential clients, where we got turned down essentially because of those reasons, we said, okay, what can we do to address these concerns? And that's when we came up with what we call the local data processing and local data storage features, which means that you can essentially bring your own bucket, either S3 at the moment or Azure data storage. You can bring these buckets for storing your data. So we don't store your data on our premises anymore, in our infrastructure. We store it on your bucket, essentially. That's number one. And we have a feature, essentially the local data processing, which means that you get from us a Docker image, a Docker container that you can spin up. And this Docker image will then connect to your data sources, extract the data into your bucket. So we don't see the data anymore. Everything data related is done on your premises, all the profiling, all everything. And this Docker container only sends metadata back to Flow.BI. So the only thing we see at the moment is NAD names, column names, descriptions, primary keys, foreign keys, and so on, but no data anymore itself. Still some data volume that we transfer, but it's not your terabytes and petabytes of data, essentially. Just the metadata. But you have to run the Docker container. You have to spin it up, maybe not one time, but a couple thousand times for a short time, right? And then it's auto scale, essentially. So that's how we address these concerns. But at the moment, we're in the incremental state, right? So we are improving the solution incrementally to build out the niche, essentially, to have a higher potential more and more of potential clients going for Flow.BI. We do it on purpose. So I always look for all the new features. Is this feature increasing my niche or not? If it's not increasing, then we keep it out for now. We deprioritize it, and go for the high priority items. So that's the first concern you said. So we're addressing those incrementally. So if you hear those concerns, let me know, because I'm super interested in why people don't want to use Flow.BI or can't use it essentially. The other thing is, I agree with you. Flow.BI might be a bit early, but I'm in here for the long haul essentially, which means that I have the full expectation. I mean, I don't know for sure. You never know what happens tomorrow, but I have a very high expectation that the data shape will grow exponentially, and I see this already. So during my career, it grew and grew over time, and I see the value of data of Flow.BI in that regard. They can deal with the data shape, and yes, while you could build a raw data vault within 2 weeks, maybe, for how many tables, for how many source tables, maybe 20, 50 source tables. Yes, I fully agree. You can do that. But what if you have 5,000 source tables or 5,000 source structures you want to get into a data platform, fully integrated, dealing with GDPR and so on? At the moment, we're working on features to identify your personal and non-personal attributes and apply it to your raw data vault to perform the satellite splits, right? So we're looking at a raw data vault where you have privacy already applied, satellite split already applied, all integrated, all done essentially, right? And improving more and more. So we talk about we're about to release 2 new features. One is for translating the metadata from your sources. Let's say you're dealing with let's say you want to build a English data warehouse, which means that the metadata is in English, satellite names and so on. But your sources are all kinds of data languages, meta languages, like a SAP with abbreviated German terms or some French system and so on. Turning that automatically into a raw data vault means that you have a mixed satellite with French, English, German terms in there. So we have a new feature coming up, a translation feature where you can translate the source system's metadata into English, but also translate the English metadata of the generated model into any language you want. So if you want to build a Czech data warehouse with Czech names on the satellites and attributes and so on, we can AI translate this metadata as well. But again, always in a way we can jump in and influence the system to become a bit better, override all the decisions or many of the decisions made by Flow.BI essentially. So and then you're looking at more capabilities. Yes, so you could agree, you could argue, well, it's not as good as my human guys at the moment, but the question is, does it have the potential? And from my opinion, yes, there's the clear potential that it will take over. The only thing is, I agree with you. Do you want to use it? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But you want to learn it, that's for sure. So you want to expose yourself to this technology, because if you ignore it, I agree, somebody else will take care of this and will overtake you essentially on the side. That's my statement here. And one more comment. The way I use AI, I don't write articles using AI, right? So I would never publish an article, put my name on a writing that's done by AI. That's number one. The other thing is I do research using AI. So when I look for something, I Google a lot, or I use Google. I Google a lot using AI essentially. Like give me all top 10 I don't know of something, and it gives me a good answer with a lot of links, and I can use that. So I'm Googling a lot using AI essentially. It takes a bit longer, but I could get better results actually, at least from my experience. I do a lot of research. If I look for something, let's say data sets, give me a data set, open data set with something. At the moment, I'm working on example data sets for Flow.BI, and I was looking for open data sets with shared business keys and so on, because Flow.BI has been designed for integrating multiple data sources. It can also produce a raw data from one source system, but the more sources you have, the more data you have, the better is the result. That's how it's being designed. And so I was looking for data sets with shared keys, or I was looking for ERP data sets and so on. And I found it better to use Gemini than Google, to be honest. So that's what I use a lot. And also like researching people sometimes. If I'm dealing with somebody new, I might use AI to give me an overview of this person, what's the background, where they come from, and so on. So it just collects data about people and organizations and so on. It's also so lots of research. That's what I'm doing using it. Also emails, improving emails. I write an email let it improve my writing. That's one thing. I use other tools to improve my like sentence-based writing. When I write an article, I use these tools as well, but they're like Grammarly or something, right? Where they also use AI to improve the grammar. I'm a non-English speaker and writer, so I'm using these tools to improve the writing as well. That's what but the whole reasoning, the whole article organization, it's all by me essentially. But I'm proving it using AI. That's for sure. But yeah, that's but I've done this all the time. So even in the old days, there's yeah. So that's just a couple of comments here. Sorry, it shouldn't be about me, to be honest. I had one question. I jumped at to be a bit short. So I'm always interested because we're also working with a lot of young people at Scalefree, but also during my career, I was always teaching students essentially. And when I started my career, I looked at some profiles of people who I admired, who I thought, well, these are interesting careers they went for. And I wondered always how they got there. And what I've really done is, back in the old days, I looked at the CVs, because you could find CVs of some people and see how they evolved over time, essentially, how they built a career, essentially. And then it gave me some ideas how I could build my career, essentially. It turned out completely different. That's another story. I had some interesting lifetime experiences in my younger career. It's a longer story. Can't share it here on the stream anyway, but that's another story. But so it didn't turn out. But I thought the idea was good to look at CVs of some more people who are further on the road. So I wonder, what do you do to see if you're a role model for the next student, and how do you get there where you are? So how do you ended up at your position, Martin, for example?
Okay, that's quite interesting story, because originally, I even didn't want to attend the university. Okay, my parents, they just pushed me in a quite hard way. Okay, so I ended at the Economic University of Prague, studying finance and tax audit, and the subjects I really liked, there was a monetary policy. Okay, so and the banking. So I started to apply for some apprenticeships in the bank, and I got into the HVB bank, into some department called operations management, and it was in fact part of the IT. So suddenly I found myself designing the new application for automation of the process of opening the client and the accounts. So that was the first bank, then the second bank, and at one moment I found myself working on the vendor side for the Unisys company. That was a company that originally helps to send the people to the moon, the company that created the UNIVAC computer.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing the project in the BAWAG Bank, implementation of the core banking system, and I was responsible for the conversion of the reports. And at this moment, I realized that I like the data the most. Okay, that's my most favorite part of the IT. And from that moment, it was, let's say, quite straightforward. Focus on the data, changing from time to time. When on the customer side, I had opportunities to be a head of the data warehouse and business intelligence in the Czech Airlines. I had the possibility to work for a GNT private bank where we were implementing the data warehouse from the scratch. And yes, and I also hit hard there because I wanted to have the modern data warehouse, metadata based. So, and at the end, I realized that to be a data warehouse manager or BI manager is nice, but to be let's say just a data expert who wants to get his hands dirty, you get better sleep, less stress, and even the money are better, and it's more fun. Okay, because I'm not the person who know how to do the politics in the companies. So, and on the project in a Raiffeisen Bank, I met Richard, who introduced me into the data world, and the rest is the history.
Okay, cool. How about you, Richard? How do you end up in your position?
My career started already in 1990,
Uh-huh.
and I had my first job about data, and also I think it was the first paid job on computers. I've got a computer for this job with sit down 10 megabytes large hard disk, and also already attacked by virus. But yeah, and the job was take the DBase version 3.5 and create in the DBase the educational program,
Yeah.
which will show the functionality of the DBase and the purposes of the database. So it was my first job, but after that I upgraded to DBase 4 version 4, and during my high school I worked many jobs, or I done many jobs in DBase 4. During during my studies on the university, it was also interesting because, for example, the exam from database systems I did for only for the second attempt.
Yeah.
I was kicked out from practice because I modeled the database example directly in third form, because I don't know why I have to model it in first normal for 10, in the second, then in the third, because I already modeled all my databases in the third form in this time. So yeah, it was crazy. But we had also very interesting topics here. Very interesting subjects. For example, the artificial intelligence and expert systems. And also the decision support systems. And I must say that, databases are perfect for me. But the decision support systems, or the expert systems, it was something new for me, and something which is using already the databases and build another applications above the databases. So my first full-time job was the head of MIS team, the Management Information Systems team, in a small development company in Brno, Brno. And after that, I created, not in this company, but it was later in Pragodata company, where we built a data warehouse for ČEZ. It's the main electricity company in the Czech Republic. And so I had an excursion in Temelín, for example, the atom plant. Atom power plant.
Nuclear power plant,
yeah. And also in other power plants. After that, I was in T-Mobile, or in this time it was only Radio Mobile, with a different name, but the same company. So now it is the T-Mobile, and my job was to create a new version of the data warehouse. And it was interesting because the amount of data which we had in ČEZ, in the whole data warehouse, was the daily load in T-Mobile. So I I step another level up with the data warehousing, and after that I created or worked on some other data warehouses. After that, it was mainly for the banking. Because it was a Equa which is already not exists. It was Raiffeisen Bank, Home Credit.
How did you get exposed to data vault? How did you get exposed to data
vault? Only the last job in the Raiffeisen Bank was using data vault, and because it is a little bit problem with data vault in the Czech Republic, because in the Czech Republic, if you have any problem, then everyone is a specialist to solving this problem. So if you want to build a data warehouse, then everyone in the company is a specialist for building data warehouses, and it means that every level of the management is trying to tell you how to do it and what is the best way. So it's tough to create something new here, but. The last job, what I mentioned, it wasn't the pure data warehouse, but it was a new requirement for the data warehouse team to combine the real-time data. So it means the data in the movement with the static data in the data warehouse, and the large old-fashioned data warehouse written on Oracle database in PLSQL wasn't able to consume the data from Kafka topics in real time. So I take this, or I've taken this requirement and created a special database. The first version was built also on Oracle, but with another technologies, and the database is still able to combine the two velocity of data changes using data vault. I must say that the data vault methodology is crucial in this topic.
It was a key argument when we introduced data vault, data vault 2.0 back then in 2000. And the book came out in 2015, I believe, or 2015. Scalefree was founded in 2016. And I was working on data vault already in 2012 essentially, or 2013 something. And it was a key argument to integrate real-time feeds with batch data essentially in the same model. Essentially, it was a big one, among other aspects essentially. Okay, cool. I see some questions here on LinkedIn. Martin, I will come back to you because I'll come back to that question essentially when we're done with the interview. Okay, so cool. What else did I have? Okay, so you guys use data vault, it's fine, and you're also active in the Snowflake. Are you using Snowflake, or what kind of database technology are you using typically in the bank? Or?
Yes, almost all banks in the Czech Republic use Oracle.
Okay.
Or Teradata.
Yeah, you're still on premise essentially, right? That's the major driver.
Yes, but actually I had a chance to do I'm doing right now another smaller project using data and the Snowflake. And Richard is helping me. And yes, I'm a big fan of the Snowflake because I really like that you just create the account, you choose the computing source, and you focus on the data, no administration needed, or it's heavily reduced.
I had one follow-up question. When you said, Richard, I believe you said that the data volume increased at telecom essentially. And would you also agree with my statement that the data shape increased exponentially? Is that the statement you would go along with, both of you essentially? Maybe Richard first, or?
Yeah, of course. But I think that during the last years, the data shape changes from the strictly structured data into more unstructured or semi-structured data.
More APIs.
Because it is the question whether a JSON or XML file is structured or not structured. But and also is increasing the amount of data, but it is side by side with the form of the data.
Yeah, cool. What about you, Martin? Would you agree with the statement that the data shape is increasing essentially exponentially?
Yes, fully agree.
Fully
agree.
So I see APIs as one source, right, for more JSON structures. And I mean, when I was in my apprenticeship, we were working with lots of XML data. So I learned a lot of XML and like XSLT and that kind of stuff. And it got then replaced by a simpler format by JSON essentially. But we see, I would say, less and less XML data, but more and more JSON essentially in nowadays data source because of APIs and real-time feeds essentially. Sending a lot of JSON data, but also the amount of entities that we have to, even if it's relational data, structured data, we see more that reports need more and more source data sets to be processed in order to come up with some information essentially. And that's because the business environment is becoming more and more complex these days, right? That's what it is, I think. So there's no way around that. Okay, cool. So when you discussed the Flow with your peer consultants, I would just want to come back to this original topic of disruption here. You said there's three major concerns. I reiterated them before we went through the interview because I had them from you actually, but they're right. So you have people who ignore the problem, you have people who jump on the train, and people who oppose the whole thing essentially. Is there any way how you would argue with, so if you can say something to your peers essentially, what would you tell them? How would you argue that they should at least maybe not oppose it, maybe jump on the train actually? Because I think that's, if there's a new emerging technology, I'm tech savvy, right? So I want to try it out and work with the technology and not fight against technology, because I believe that it's what we call progress, right? That's what it is. Any arguments for how to convince them essentially to be more open-minded essentially?
Yes. Okay. To be honest, the speed of the changes in the IT environment, I mean, the new methodologies, the new technologies, the new ways how we integrate data, it's changing rapidly, and I believe that the speed or the rate of the change is increasing. Okay, and for quite a long time in the Czech Republic, you were very comfortable when you know the Oracle, you know the banking business, and you could spend 30 years of your career at that was okay. But these days, almost all banks and other institutions are somehow jumping on cloud. Of course, there are various technologies, various data platforms, various types of the architecture, and it may happen that in 5 or 10 years you may not have a job because the Oracle-based or Teradata-based data warehouses in the Czech Republic, there will be heavily reduced. So this is one thing, and the second thing is that I believe that the role of the consultants it just changed. Okay. And I believe that this is also because of the generative AI, because on some project you have a people who just do the analysis, who just sit down with a client, write the requirements, and you have another group of the people who is just doing the profiling of the data, another group of the people who are assistant, but significant part of those roles can be somehow replaced, can be automated. So more and more, the companies, vendors, and the customers, they want on the project senior professionals who can check the data, who can discuss with the business, who can somehow produce Python script, who can lead the team, who can design the test strategy. And so therefore, you as a data or IT professional, you have to adapt to the cycle of never-ending learning.
Yeah.
It's challenging, it's stressful. You have to sacrifice something, but I believe the times when you were happy with some technology or the approach for 10 years, it's a past.
Yeah.
That's my personal approach to this.
What do you think, Richard?
I think that the most general answer should be, jump on the train while it's the time, because later may be too late.
Yeah.
But I have more practical see or on the project on Flow.BI, because if you think about the use cases, then the first main use case for Flow.BI is to implement a new data warehouse or a part or some new part of your current data warehouse. And it needs, the first one needs the situation that you are building a new data warehouse. Who is now building a new data warehouse and also in data vault methodology. The second possibility is add a new data source into your current data warehouse, but you need the data warehouse in the data vault model using the data vault methodology. Okay, there are maybe 3 or 4 data warehouses in the Czech Republic. No. But I think that Flow.BI is already prepared enough to help with any migration. If you have, for example, current CRM system and you want to replace the system with another system, it's very data sensitive operation. It is very expensive for everyone. And I think that Flow.BI can help you with the migration of the data and shorten all the works around the data to the minimum, because I think that the main strength of Flow.BI is in the data assessment, and this is the main. If you are doing any migration, you must do the data assessment of your current database, of your current data, and you also need a data assessment of the new system. And it's very, very tough if you have only the definition of your new system or documentation. You have no data in the new system, so you are not able to compare the data how it looks in your current system and how it looks in the new system. So I think that for that is Flow.BI perfect.
There's a use case for when you migrate source systems, let's say from vendor A to vendor B or something, right? And there's especially no migration script or migration tool to migrate the data. You could have the idea of attaching all your source data into a raw data vault, and then you can always derive any target model you want. And typically it's a star schema, relation schema, or a snowflake schema or something for reporting purposes. But what if you just derive the model for system B, right? For the new system, one-to-one, let's say either the database level or on the API level, and then have a Python script that copies all the data from your target, from your interface mark as we call it, over to the new application. That migration is done. That even works for the for a bi-directional migration when you want to, let's say, maintain both systems for a while. You just attach both systems, the old one and the new one, as data sources to the raw data vault, integrate that, and then derive both models, the old one and the new one, essentially at the same time, and then you can absorb all the changes on both sides into both directions essentially, or even 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 systems that works as well. And the only problem is you have to attach a lot of data to the raw data vault, and that's where it gets tricky because that's a lot of work. Well, Flow.BI does it automatically, right? That's the key advantage here, and that's that's a very interesting use case, and we actually proposing that a lot. Okay, cool. So I had one thought. Oh damn it, I forgot it. So okay, so yeah, that's a good point. I see a couple of comments here. One from Martin. So I would say thanks for the interview. I don't want to steal too much of your time. Good insights. But yeah, it's I fully agree with you that I would also jump early on the train, because then I like to develop a technology or frame it essentially, and that's when you come in early, you can frame the technology and make it a better tool essentially, and not when you come in late it's done, and either it fits or not, right? So that's what it is. Thanks for joining me today. I would essentially answer a couple of questions here. I see at least one on LinkedIn, not one on YouTube. So if you have any questions, just shoot them right now. It's the best time. And thanks guys for joining. And see you. We have another topic coming up where we have a discussion later on. Not today, but you will be here. I have the expectation you will be here one more time, essentially, at least. Cool. And because it's Flow.BI related as well. Cool. Thanks for joining, and see you guys later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So there's one question here on the LinkedIn chat from Martin. Let me just read this here because I can't show it here on the screen, at least not in the tool here. The LinkedIn integration is there. Hi guys. Unfortunately, I do not know Flow.BI, so maybe a silly question. Is there any support of curated? Let me see. 1 second. I lost of curated metadata catalogs to get the information for designing the raw data vault? Or is it based only on source system and the data scanning, profiling, etc.? So first of all, design-wise, Flow.BI is data-driven. So we don't look at your existing raw data vault or conceptual model. We don't look at your existing raw data vault to come up with a better raw data vault or something. We always derive the raw data vault from your source data set. That's number one. So we look at your data, we look at your metadata, both, and then derive a raw data vault. Give an example. If you have an empty table, an empty source table, we will ignore the source table because we can't derive a raw data vault if there's no data. We need data, and we need as much metadata that you have. So the more metadata you can provide, the better. But the minimum is that we need to know which entities do you have. I mean, in the end, we connect via JDBC drivers to your data source, and in the JDBC driver, I need to find some entities and columns. I don't even need the data types. We can profile those. But the more metadata you have, primary keys, foreign keys, descriptions, so on, we're going to use that. So that improves the target model essentially. And so it's really data-driven by design. It uses data-driven concepts from Data Vault to generate the raw data vault. And I had one comment to my interview partners here. Richard said that the Flow.BI generates raw data vault. But then there's also other data vault solutions where they don't use data vault, right? That's the niche essentially. Now here's the thing: Flow.BI is based on data vault concepts, but it's not per se a data vault tool. We actually started out with the design of a data vault tool, so we had data vault all over the place in the UI. But then we decided to remove that because we also introduced an expert system, and Richard said it as well that when I believe in academia, he was also working with expert systems, and inside Flow.BI there's an expert system, and like a fact-based, rule-based system with AI integration and so on. And this expert system is not open yet, but it's also customizable under the hood. So we have a lot of code in there where you can step in eventually when we open this up. You can step in and modify what's being produced here. So we could. And that's actually really a ticket I have open at the moment. We could generate more than just Data Vault 2.0 or Data Vault 2.1. We could generate easily a source vault, for example. I'm not a big fan of it because it's imperformant and so on. As long as I don't want to go into too much detail here, we could produce something like that, or we could produce an Inman style data warehouse, but without the business logic, because Flow.BI is not generating any business logic. We're just integrating your raw data and turning that into a integrated enterprise data model. But it doesn't have to be data vault. The requirement is it has to be data driven and schema on read. That's what we're producing. But in this regard, we can produce everything. We can produce a modified data vault if you don't agree with us or me, because I built the expert system here and configured it essentially. If you don't agree with me how to build a raw data vault, we can modify that. If you're using a specialized tool where they have their own caveats, their own quirks in the application that you would like to have as well in your model, we can produce that. We can modify the existing data vault design. We can't produce a logical data vault where you essentially apply business logic when loading the raw data vault, because Flow.BI is not generating any business logic here. And yeah, it's not going to happen because we stick to the data-driven design. We're producing raw data vaults, period. And what we teach and preach, the data-driven design. On the other hand, here's the thing. Let's say, and that's a question here, can you have a curated metadata catalog to get the information for designing the raw data vault? Couple of comments here. First of all, you could integrate, for example, your data catalog in terms of your classifications for security, privacy, and rate of change. If that's done in your catalog, you can attach or ingest that into Flow.BI. Flow.BI is the user interface is essentially a user interface for REST interface. We have an API first approach, which means that every functionality in the user interface you can script. So I could, for example, feed the classifications for my latest satellite splits, security, rate, privacy, and rate of change. I can feed that via REST API into Flow.BI essentially, via REST API from your data catalog into here. That's one thing. And then you could also, let's say you have a conceptual model or a ontology, how your business works. We have customers, we have products, customers purchase products, that kind of stuff. Where Flow.BI, what it does is, we call this concepts, because I like the term a bit better, more easier than ontology essentially. I like easy terms essentially. So, but that's your ontology essentially. And what Flow.BI does is it looks at your data and tries to identify these concepts inside your data, customer, purchases, and so on. But the cool thing is, while we build a platform that would do the whole job, you just, in the most simple case, you just attach your data sources. Eventually, everything with the JVC driver will work. At the moment, we support SQL Server and derivatives. We support Postgres and derivatives, Snowflake. We support Athena for data lakes and Apache Drill, for example, but also MailChimp and Salesforce, and more to come essentially. So if you need a driver, just let us know and we can implement this. What Flow.BI does, it looks at your data and tries to identify these concepts inside your data. And there's a concept classifier, and that's what you see here on the screen. The idea is that Flow.BI does the job completely. So if you don't care about data vault or the data model, you just attach your data sources, hit the red button, and it will produce you a valid raw data vault, a valid design. That's what we always promise. Now, however, even if the AI takes the lead here and does the job, me as a human, I would like to influence the AI. And that's what we have this influence screen. We really call it influence these days. It used to have a different name, but the way I promoted this or taught this was really to influence the AI. So all these buttons here, all these tabs are used to influence the AI essentially. And that means essentially we can override the findings of the AI. We just override this. Now the thing is this classifier here for the concept is a classifier that's optimized for recognizing concepts it has already seen. And on data sets it knows. So the thing is, Flow.BI doesn't know many data sets in my opinion. So it knows Salesforce, it knows MailChimp, it knows some ERP systems and so on, some online stores. But it doesn't know all the data out there, right? There's an endless number of data structures. It only knows a tiny fraction of what's available in the world. Here's the thing. When you attach a data source, it will recognize structures it knows from before. Maybe some similar, maybe you're attaching not Salesforce, but Microsoft CRM. Well, in Microsoft CRM, there are similar structures than in Salesforce, I promise you, like opportunities, accounts, products, and so on. So it will recognize at least a big concept and re-recognize them essentially again. It might make mistakes, but we step in now as humans and override the concepts. It's just a free text field. You can override it the way you want. If you want to call the It's authorized apps. So let's call this apps, for example. So I just overwrite this and change it. And that way, now the recognizer knows your data set from a data and metadata perspective and your classifications. And now it keeps learning. The more it sees, the more it learns. And the more you help the system, the more it learns, the better the algorithm becomes essentially. It's a self-learner. So it improves over time. That's one thing. It will never know all the data sets, but it will sooner or later know all the standard data sets. That's for sure. The more data sets we see, it will learn it. Now the problem is that you, as a customer base, you don't agree what, let's say, contacts and leads, for example, are. Is this a party or is this a contact and a lead concept, right? So some organizations, they would like to combine it into a party object, and some other organizations, they would like to keep this as separate objects for accounts, leads, and contacts. So you want to apply your own conceptual model or your ontology to your data warehouse, and that's fine. What happens is this. Let's say you have a conceptual model, and that's what I assume here, Martin, that you have in your organization some conceptual or ontology, and you want to use it in your data warehouse. That actually works. So what you do is you take a screen, and then you classify all these incoming tables towards your ontology. You just overwrite this and map the incoming tables to your ontology, essentially. You need to help the system here. To some extent, Flow.BI will identify those and re-identify them later, but you have to help them, that's for sure. And then what happens is that in the next step, what Flow.BI does is once you hit the red button, it attaches the raw data to your concepts in a logical model. But that's it. So we have these concepts, let's say party, and then we attach the raw data to the party concept. And for us in Data Vault, if you want to produce a Data Vault design here, that means we have a hub for party, and there will be satellites. But the satellites are not driven by a concept, right? Because the satellites are data driven, which means that it captures the structure from your source data set. What descriptions do you have for party? First name, last name, from contact, let's say. All these attributes we attach to your party hub as in a satellite, right? Because that's the data design. If you go for some other design, we can talk about that as well. Like maybe a TwinF, simplified TwinF design or something, we can talk about that. But that's the idea. So what Flow.BI would do in this regard is it attaches the raw data to your ontology. But that's what I do all the time when I do this manually, right? So when I manually build a raw data vault, I also use, my starting point is a conceptual design. I try to understand your business. What are your business objects inside your business model? Or in other terms, what are your concepts in your conceptual model? And that's your starting point for modeling, for building a good business-driven raw data vault, in my opinion. And because I was designing the solution, that's how we built the system, essentially. That's the idea. So follow-up question for Martin. Thank you, Michael. I get it. It would be possible to push the business metadata ontology context from the catalog to Flow.BI via API, right? Yeah, that's correct. So Flow.BI has a big amount of, because everything is REST-based here, we didn't build, everything is REST-based, period. So we have let me find API. I believe that's one. Yeah, that's the one. So we have the API here, and you can do everything, creating user accounts, doing what else, all via the API here. And there are somewhere, I'm not sure, I believe it's via instances, you can essentially modify the classification for privacy and so on, and we're using that. So it's all via REST API. Even if the REST code might not be here in the documentation, then it's just not documented, but it's the whole UI goes via REST API. That's the design of the user interface, essentially. So you can feed your security classifications, your privacy classifications, or rate of changes if you have that in your data catalog. You can feed that in here. You can also we have a lot of cases where you have some data in a data lake, but then you have only these Parquet files, right? And Parquet files, they might have column names, and we have the entity name and column names, but even the data types are simplified. So you only have varchars, and even I believe timestamps are just varchars and so on, right? You have very simplified data types, but then you have the original metadata from your source, either in the source system itself or in some data catalog, right? And what we can do is, this was built I built my experience first, and then we started building in Flow.BI, essentially. So what you can have is, you have one data source connection that gives Flow.BI access to your data sources. And then we have a separate, optionally a separate metadata connection, where you can select the metadata from a separate source. And what we expect is essentially that you deliver us these ANSI SQL entities from the information schema, like tables, columns, key, column usage, and so on. 5 or 6 tables is what we need. And those you can essentially configure. You activate this metadata connection, and then there could be any connection that we support, right? So you could have a data lake on AWS Athena. That's how you use to query the data lake. And then you have your metadata connection on a Postgres database, maybe where you have your data hub, where you configure all that, right? The only thing is, I need a ANSI SQL representation of the metadata. I can't interpret, and I don't want to interpret, your data hub metadata or something else. We don't do that. Which means that you have to provide a number of custom queries here that return the metadata in a ANSI SQL form, like the tables connection. Let me just show it to you. We have this documented actually a lot. I like to write so that we have a good comprehensive documentation here. And that's in, I believe, somewhere here. Yeah, so the those are the columns I would expect for the columns entity, and that's just ANSI, right? So if you look for information schema.columns, that's what you have in this entity by default. You don't have to complete everything, right? But the more you complete, the more you provide us, the better. And that's the basic idea. So you could, for example, pull the metadata out of a data catalog, out of Data Hub. Well, Data Hub stores everything as JSON, so you have to pass a JSON using Postgres or whatever, and give us this data set here, right? That's what I need. But that actually works. Or what also works is, and I'm working with Martin and Richard at the moment on some example data sets, and you could also just query the metadata from the original source, because that's where you have the information schema, right? That's where you have all that. And you just run it against the data source to get the metadata. Just be aware, not just your data changes, but also your metadata changes, right? The number of columns is changing and so on. So the thing is, what Flow.BI does is, if you separate the metadata connection from the data connection, you can also use it to influence what Flow.BI sees. It always starts with the metadata. And if you omit a table, a source table, let's say customers, from the metadata, Flow.BI will ignore it, right? If you modify the structure, well, your metadata has to match the data, because otherwise it will not be an error, but then we assume the column that you added here and doesn't actually exist would be null all the time, I believe at least. If you attach a table that doesn't exist, well, Flow.BI thinks it's empty. So it will ignore the data, and therefore it will completely ignore the entity essentially. So it is error it's error resistant, I would say. But you essentially can omit stuff. You can omit tables. You can omit columns from Flow.BI, so it doesn't see these, let's say, technical IDs, for example, that we see in the data lake often. You want to omit them? Fine. Just have a prepared metadata that we can easily produce at large, at scale, right? And then that's how we feed that in. That's one option. The metadata connection is a big one, where we can integrate the data hub or some other technology, doesn't matter, or where you use the REST API to ingest classifications, especially classifications. Let's say you have a conceptual model. You could also, and let's say you have in your data catalog, you have already classified all your tables to the concept. Perfect. That's what we need. So you can use the REST API to feed that into Flow.BI as well. So it's Flow is super much customizable, super much scriptable because of this. In the end, Flow is essentially a user interface for a couple of APIs. We have two APIs. We have a REST API where you can modify everything, and we have a SQL API. What about you want to apply the findings from Flow.BI back into your data catalog? Right, that also works, because in the end there's a SQL API where you can run SQL queries against what we produced, against the logical model, and then feed it back into database automation tools like Datavolt for DBT or Datavolt Builder, for example, and other tools coming up. But you can also feed it back into your data catalog, for example. That also works. Also, what we're also interested in are descriptions. So if you have descriptions in your data catalog, also great, because we use those, for example, to better interpret your data. But also, we use these descriptions for documenting your raw data vault. I mean, we have a natural language generator, that documents some parts of it, but it's more focused on the data vault aspects, like this hub is being loaded from these two source systems and so on. And then, but we use these descriptions from your data catalog or from your source system to describe the satellite attributes, for example, to add them to the satellite descriptions or to the attribute descriptions, for example. So the more metadata you deliver, the better will become the generated raw data model. But the cool thing is, let me give you some feedback on the way we generate these example data sets at the moment. We'll look at some ERP data, for example, but the ERP data is also missing metadata. But we typically either you have the metadata in your source system, or if it's not in your, let's say, source system, you can often recreate that somehow. And we can do this at scale. I can do this for the whole source system, essentially. It's not that I have to invent this with a lot of labor. If you don't have the metadata, so be it. Then just feed the data into Flow.BI and it will generate you a data model. But if you have the metadata, feed it as well. That's all I'm saying, essentially. So, and we do this at scale. I don't do this on a per table basis. I do this for whole source systems, essentially. And then I'm done, essentially. So it's not such a big deal to add the metadata to improve the results. That's the basic idea. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah, if you're interested in these details, we have a training coming up. There's a training coming up in US time zone and in European time zone. So there's one training, it's all after summer break now. There's one training in, 1 second. This one is, yeah, the first one is US time zone. That's why it starts for me in Germany at 5 p.m. So on the original website, this plugin should not be there. So it's on August 25, 2 days, and then the week after, September 3rd and 4th, the other trainings. We have at the moment 4 modules. An introduction training, that's where we also discuss use cases a lot, like the migration use case we discussed today. That's discussed in the training essentially, but also like 20 other use cases. What you can do with Data Vault and how Flow.BI can essentially speed that up and make it better and so on. And then also an introduction to the tool itself. Then we have a in-depth training that's more for the tech guys here, how to set up security, how to set up instances inside Flow.BI, how to set up the JBC drivers, what needs to be considered and so on. Then we have another module for generated data vault models. That's where we discuss essentially the tweaks that we did in the data vault design. Well, we didn't invent anything here. What Flow.BI generates is a pure raw data vault as we teach and preach it all the time in the trainings. We didn't invent anything or made it happen somehow, right? That we generate this, no. But we have some stuff in there, some ideas. Okay, I don't want to go in circles here, but think about this. Flow.BI is imitating the human data modeler. It's imitating me, to be honest, because I built the expert system here, which you can customize later if you don't agree with it. It is fine. It's just a starting point. So it imitates me essentially, but me as a human, I make mistakes. And now you have a choice. When you build an AI design like this, you can either try to avoid these human mistakes, but then you're not imitating the human input here or the human modeler here anymore, or you accept the human mistakes and introduce provisions for that. And that's what we went for. We went for the second option. We just accepted human error and made sure if this error happens, we can make sure that by all means we produce a valid data vault design, data vault model by all times, right? So no matter if you make mistakes or the AI makes mistakes, here by saying, it's always a valid data vault model. And valid means here we have a model that captures all your data without losing, without any inconsistencies essentially. That's the basic idea. Now, to make it happen, think about this. Flow.BI performs link splits. So it might separate certain relationships into their own link structures. For example, hierarchies, for example. We identify hierarchies inside your data set and then turn it into a hierarchical link. But that way we also split a link. And when you split a link, there's a risk that you might know from the training, from the data vault training. There's a risk for a violation of the unit of work. And that leads to inconsistencies in your data set in a raw data vault if you don't take care of that. So what's the easiest fallback strategy for that? Well, never split a link. That's my personal approach if I can, especially if I don't know the data set. The more I know the data set, the earlier I do link splits. But if I don't know the data set, I don't do link splits at all. And Flow.BI doesn't know your data set. At least that's the starting point. And that's why we introduce a unit of work link, as we call it, it's just a standard link. There's nothing special about it, except that it spans across all your hub references from the same source table. So we never split a link, at least we might do that optionally, but we always have this unit of work link. So if anything goes wrong, you always have the consistency maintained by the unit of work link. That's always there. So that's what I have to explain, because otherwise you stumble over this unit of work link and think, well, what's that, right? What kind of secret is that? No, it's just a standard link. We just make sure it always captures all your hub references coming from the same source table. That's what we call unit of work link. And we have 2 or 3 of these provisions in the model that I have to explain. And then we also explain, because the starting point for Flow.BI was always have a valid data model. When I started the research here, that was my requirement. I didn't care for a very good data model because I didn't know how to produce it at the very early beginning, right? But I said, okay, what if we can only produce a valid model? Is that enough? Yeah, it's enough. It would be enough, because then you can derive a better model downstream, down the road. And but then I got eager, right? So I said, okay, what if we can influence the system to produce a better model? And then I asked myself, what's a better model? What makes a better model, right? And the problem is that's very subjective, right? So I have a personal opinion what a better model is. If I compare 2 models, what is a better model? I have a personal opinion on that. But you might not share my opinion, which is fine to me, right? So the first thing we define is, what options do you have to define a better model, to get a better understanding of that? You have to come up with your own definition what a better model means to you, and then we show you how you influence Flow.BI to turn or to produce this better model. But what better means, I don't know. You have to make the decision here. I can only give you some recommendations or some ideas, but then you will decide what a better model means for you, and then you know how to influence the system to produce this better model, essentially. That's the basic idea of this training. Super interesting training, actually. And then we have a reporting engine, like the overview dashboard here, or we have reports and so on, and that's all based on a reporting engine where you can essentially define your own reports, essentially. And because we think about this, inside Flow.BI, we have a repository where we store the metadata, and that's a data vault. It's a data platform, essentially. And we have staging areas, we have a raw data vault, we have business vault, we have lots of information marts, and which means that we have a fully versioned system. We keep track of all your changes to your metadata. We keep track of all the AI changes on the changes on the AI decisions, and we keep track of all the model changes, and we expose that to you guys, to the US user. We expose this metadata step by step. So we have like maybe 10 information marts and interface marts at the moment there, but I'm absolutely willing to also expose the whole raw data vault to you. Why not? It's just that I want to make sure it's secured and so on, right? So that's why we don't publish everything at once. And I'm a big fan of going step by step, not overwhelming everybody. So I'm going step by step, but eventually my goal is to expose the raw data vault and the business vault to you. I don't see a problem with that. I just want to make sure it's really in the shape I want it to have, essentially. And because now, since you don't know the raw data vault, I have the freedom of modifying it. We don't do that anymore. So, but I still have the freedom, and that's also another reason why we don't expose it yet. But this will become available, and you can build reports on that. Like I'm working on documentation reports at the moment for my examples, and then but you could also build delta reports, how your sources changed, how the logic model has changed over time, and so on. So security reports and so on, right? So there's lots of metadata available, and that's available to you via reporting engine, but also via SQL API and so on. So you can really query the metadata from our backend, essentially, using SQL. That's also actually working. We just have a Postgres connection to our repository, essentially. All right. So yeah, Flow is very open. It's an enterprise tool, so everything is customizable, everything is open and accessible, either via REST API or via SQL API. There's different options, essentially, how you can access this. And yeah, so if it's interesting for you, then check it out. Check out the training. Get in touch with me if you like the idea here, what you see. Yeah, talk to us, essentially. Okay, so let me just double check if I see anything else. Last time I didn't catch the LinkedIn comments, was really bad. Yeah, so thanks, Martin, for the question. It was appreciated that. It's a good number of questions here. So yeah, thanks for joining today. I think I'm done. Discussed all that I wanted to discuss. Let me just double check that. Yeah, works for me. So really about disruptive technologies here today. That's the outcome. Don't be scared of your job, right? So there's no, I don't see it coming that they will reduce data consultants or data engineers or data scientists, because again, the data ship is growing. We might be a bit early with Flow.BI, but I'd rather be early in the market than too late. That's the other thing. And I'm here for a long haul, which means that we're funding it. So I don't see any issue here. At least incrementally developing the solution, right? And this will not go away. That's for sure. So Flow.BI is not going away. The technology is out there now, and it's available, and you can go for it. I'm in here for a long haul. That's for sure. I love the idea. I'm going for it. And yeah, so that's the idea. Maybe early, but better early than too late. And I'm absolutely convinced, to be honest, that the data shape will grow, and the need for Flow.BI and maybe other AI solutions will grow as well. So that's not a point. And I think that with our approach, with the data-driven approach, where it was complicated to build. It was the most challenging system I've ever built, to be honest. It's accumulation of my skills in data vault and data in AI, essentially data mining AI. It's a combination of those skills essentially, and other skills actually. And that's what Flow.BI is. And it was super complicated to build. It was the most challenging raw data vault I've ever built manually, like for the repository, right? It must have to be the most perfect raw data vault, because it's the backend system. I might show it to you one day as well. It's a very semi-structured raw data vault. You can think about that we deal with all kinds of different structures, because it must be very generic. So you can expect a lot of JSON data in there, XML data, and array data. Lots of semi-structured data sets, essentially. That's what it is. So very challenging raw data vault in the backend repository. Very challenging approach for the data mining here. Longer story, but it's a quite interesting project. It's a side project, right, essentially. Cool. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks again for Martin and Richard to join me here today as well for answering some interesting questions and for the interesting answers here. And I hope to see you next Friday, where we have a discussion on empowerment, because that's what we do at Scalefree a lot. Our business strategy is to empower our clients to better understand Data Vault and use it in their projects, but it has some other aspects as well. So we talk about that one next time with an internal guest from Scalefree, and will be a super interesting session. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks for joining. See you next Friday, hopefully. Thank you guys.